Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is on those creepy bosses that cross a line. If you've ever had a creepy boss, make sure you sub to my second channel, Bad Vibes No Sleep. The link is in the description. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I was 18 and I got a job as a bartender at one of the more popular nightclubs in my city. To start with, I didn't even apply for the bartender job, but applied as a chef. The owner of the place told me that he wanted me in the bar where the people would see me because I looked too good to be in the kitchen. This man was twice my age. I worked my first night and felt very creeped out by this dude, so I politely told him that I didn't want the job. He proceeds to call me and text me for 2 weeks, asking me to come back to work for him. About 2 months later, I hear from my friend that the man had been accused of 5 rapes, all different girls, and a small explosion went off by the entrance of the nightclub, and the place was now shut down for good. Never heard how long of a sentence he got. Remember, always trust your gut feeling. So about 13 years ago, when I was maybe 4 or 5, my grandma used to work for this disabled guy. His name was Rudy, and my brother and I used to go there while my grandma worked. When my brother went back to school, I was still too young to go to school, so I stayed in his house with my grandmother. I was often left alone with him because my grandma had to go to the store to get groceries and whatnot. He was really nice at first, but he always had an off feeling surrounding him. I was a kid and didn't care about it though. He was always doing weird things, and it should have been obvious that I shouldn't trust him, but I couldn't not trust him. He would always give me snacks and toys. How could you dislike someone who does that? I remember the first time he did something. He pulled down my pants. I thought it was a game at first, so I tried to run away. He wouldn't let go of my pants though. I didn't see anything wrong with it at the moment of time. He tried pulling me towards him, but I was running in the opposite direction. I wasn't going to let him, not because I knew it was wrong, but because I thought it was a game. I finally got away and pulled my pants back up. I ran into the living room and acted as if nothing happened, but that's what it seemed, as if it was normal to do. He did this numerous amount of times, to the point where I knew it was wrong, and I got uncomfortable. This is all I remember him doing, but I'm not sure if he did anything else. It was years ago, and this is the first time I've chosen to type about it, or tell anyone, because I felt as if it was my fault, and I didn't want to be viewed differently, so I kept it to myself. Hi everyone. So lately I've had some requests to finally share the whole story of the homeless man I accidentally took in as a tenant and the incidents that followed. I'm just saying in advance, this is a long one, but every detail is relevant. Please note, although everything I have documented is factual, the case was never solved and has likely gone cold since this happened more than 10 years ago. So back in 2007, I found myself working as a bartender at a now closed pub in my hometown. Not a job I particularly liked, but it paid the bills. At this time, they had hired a new kitchen manager that we will simply know as Kearney. Kearney was a pleasant enough man, mostly keeping to himself, but always stayed late to help the barman do our closing duties, so we all liked him for that. New in town, Kearney had yet to find a place of a permanent residence, and I had recently lost my tenant, so someone suggested he ask me. He was considerably older than the tenants I usually took in, but having a streak of bad luck with tenants my own age, I thought an older man with a nice steady job may be a shift in the right direction, so I agreed. Kearney wasted no time and followed me home that very same night. Only he wasn't alone. Enter Lawrence, the boyfriend of Kearney. Honestly, I didn't even realize he was gay up to that point, but was water off my back regardless, looking back now. What really should have bothered me though was Lawrence's appearance. He looked like he had been sleeping on the street. So Kearney moved in. Lawrence was there a lot too, and it was easy to know when, due to his ringtone sounding like quacking of ducks. Kearney had some habits that were rather noteworthy to the story. In particular, he basically never closed his door, no matter what he was doing in there. It was always wide open. 2. Although he was a very heavy smoker, he never once smoked inside the house. So Kearney had been living there for about 2 weeks when I had come down with an awful case of pink eye. This being highly contagious, I was given a leave of absence from my bartending job, and therefore decided to go wait it out at my sister's for a few days. Apparently, I didn't mind giving it to her. So the day my sister was scheduled to come pick me up, I took a casual stroll into the bar that myself and Ben, my good friends from high school, at the time co-worker, had been building in my house. And something caught my eye. All the liquor bottles were completely empty. Now, those who had been frequenting my house at the time would know that we're not just talking about 1 or 2 bottles of brandy here, but bottles of whiskey, gin, vodka, schnapps, liqueurs. Basically, it was a full-stock bar that could host a pretty big party without requiring much in the way of additions. So I called Kearney in, asking him if he knew anything about this, receiving feedback that Lawrence and he had been on a slight drinking binge. Those were the actual words he used that had left me both furious about the thousands worth of stock they had drank, but also slightly impressed that they were actually still alive. Regardless, I said I would be dealing with it upon my return. So I'm with my sister for a few days, and on a Friday, I get a call from the local police department asking me if I know a Conrad Schultz. Ironically enough, I didn't. They finally add that I would probably know him as Kearney, and that I should probably come down to the station, as they just arrested his boyfriend for trying to sell my camera equipment. So my sister rushes me back home, where all my camera equipment was on display at the police station. It was on this visit that I'm informed that Lawrence was actually a Navy SEAL who got dishonorably discharged before turning to a life of crime and now had a rap sheet the length of a Bible. The kicker was both he and Kearney were actually homeless men who had met at the Salvation Army. So Lawrence is in jail and my sister drops me off at home. Based on Kearney's account of what happened, he had turned Lawrence in himself as he couldn't allow Lawrence to do what he was trying to do. Although I appreciate the sacrifice, I told Kearney that he would have to go, having been the overall cause of all this. However, not wanting to leave him a homeless man, I gave him until the end of the month to make other arrangements. So Monday came around, and having just completed a staff meeting, I walk home to encounter a very much free Lawrence, sitting on the sidewalk across my house, watching it. I confront Lawrence as to why he's there, and he tries to apologize before begging for money. I dismissed him without giving him a cent. Now, I go back to the previous night. See, I mentioned having a staff meeting for a reason, as it was at that meeting where we had gotten a rather sizable list of liquor bottles that had gone missing from the storeroom, leaving us all suspecting each other. I, however, would not have to wait long to figure out who the real culprit was, as a few days later, I opened the garage bin to see the missing bottles, all empty and staring back at me. I decided to sit on this information for the time being, although I did photograph it just in case I needed the evidence later. I also called over Ben to inform him of the developments. As this was quickly becoming a detective game, we decided to enter Kearney's room and search for further evidence. Nothing of vast significance in there, with one exception, 2 single photographs of Lawrence before he had turned into the homeless version of Lex Luthor or Charles Xavier. Actually, there were several of Lawrence's things still in there, but as Lawrence spent a lot of time there before the incident, I accepted this as normal. Now, I should also add that I mentioned Lawrence's release to Kearney and told him that if I suspected that they were still seeing each other, I would throw him out of the house myself. Only a few days would pass before this came into play. On this particular night, I had been bartending again, and Kearney had constantly been stopping by the bar to help himself to glasses half full of wine and half full of Coke, which he would drink outside the restaurant. We confronted him about this, but as he correctly pointed out, he was still a manager and we had no right to tell him what he could do or could not do. On his fourth trip, however, I had grown suspicious and decided to follow him outside, where I encountered Lawrence sitting outside, sharing half a Coke wine concoction with Kearney. This pissed me off, so the next day I returned to the restaurant with the photographic evidence and handed it over to the general manager, who was also kind of my friend. Although I hadn't physically seen it, I had heard a confrontation through the office door when he fired Kearney. Kearney left, obviously upset, and apparently had no idea that I had been the one to turn him in. So we had to close early that night, and I was walking home. Going past the high school, I saw Kearney coming in the opposite direction. He walked past me, literally only saying 2 words, "I'm scared," before disappearing into the darkness. That would be the last time I would ever physically lay eyes on Conrad Schultz. So we reached the final week, and before Kearney's eviction was to take place, Ben had to come to stay with me for the duration, as we both wanted to monitor the situation and make sure nothing else happens. It was in this week that Kearney's behavior suddenly changed. He was constantly smoking in his room and had his door closed 24/7. In fact, neither Ben or I caught so much of a peek of him in that entire week, which we hadn't thought much of at the time. So the day of Kearney's eviction comes around. Ben had to go home for a few hours, and I finally hear Kearney's bedroom door open. Someone walks out of the room, opens the front door, and leaves. I follow him outside, but somehow he had already completely disappeared. They had left the house keys, indicating that he obviously wasn't planning to come back. I took the keys, noticing something strange. Although the correct keys were still on the keychain, there were also several that weren't mine. Why would he leave me the wrong keys? I remember thinking to myself as I walked into his room. His room was a shock, not because of the state it was in. The two had broken the beds and acted wild monkey sex, but I had already known that. As I said, he never closed the damn door. But more that he literally left almost all his belongings behind, with one exception. You guessed it, the 2 photos of Lawrence. Upon further investigation, I suddenly realized that all traces of Lawrence ever being there had completely vanished, with all of Kearney's stuff still left behind. There was one thing of Lawrence left behind though, his duck ringtone, which it turned out hadn't been so much a ringtone, but an actual duckling, which now strolled around casually in the vacant bedroom. We named him Neville. So Ben returns and gets updated about the developments. Both of us are thinking the way he left was rather weird. Of course, the whole thing has been weird. It was only when I asked the infamous question that this all became a conspiracy theory. Did you actually see Kearney in this last week? It was to our shock that we realized neither of us had. Suddenly putting the puzzle pieces together, the changing of habits, Neville the duck, the wrong keys, only Lawrence's stuff being gone. It was a great discomfort that we both asked the question, who had really been living in our house this last week? During the next few days, Ben and I went on a mission searching the town, crawling into drain pipes, trying to find any trace of Kearney, but they all added up to nothing. Conrad Schultz had simply vanished off the face of the earth. That wasn't the case with Lawrence though. No, he was still around. Having made some new homeless friends, we encountered him several times begging on the streets. I asked him every time, "Where's Kearney, Lawrence?" And he just acted like he never heard of him. The last time I would see Lawrence was across from work, attempting to break into a car. I had called the police on him, and they arrived rather quickly, arresting him on the spot. While he was being led away by the police, I shouted at him one last time, "Where's Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just ignored me, and the cops dragged him away. The next day I filed a police report, reporting Kearney as a missing person, and suggesting that Lawrence may know something about it. But nothing ever came of it. So Lawrence, I don't know if you did something to Kearney or not, but if you did, let's not meet again. Where to begin? I'll just start back to literally last month. So I started working with this guy, who for the sake of the story, I'll call him Bob. Bob is a kind person. I unleashed my full throttle of sarcasm on. Making fun of him just made me feel better, but he seemed to like it. Little did I know that he liked it a lot. I just thought he likes being made fun of, so no harm done, right? Well, if I had been right, I wouldn't be writing this. To be clear, I only thought of him as just being a friend, never anything more than that. Bob is 34, and I'm 22. Hopefully you figured out that I'm a female by now. He also has 2 kids and 2 ex-wives. One of them is our co-worker, who works in a different department. Bob starts bringing food in and candy for me and my co-workers. It made me feel weird, but he keeps insisting that it's just his way of being nice to everyone. Anyways, we become friends on Facebook, and he kept messaging me via Messenger and wanting to talk to me. I'm not always in the mood to talk to people, and sometimes I'm busy, and when I wouldn't respond to him, he would get all moody and upset. He started saying things like, "You're mad at me? Whatever I did, I'm sorry." And at work, when I didn't want to talk to him, he'd act all weird and moody. He offers to buy me my own pizza, which makes me feel extremely weird. But I just let it go, since he ended up getting me one. I mean, Bob is just too nerdy, but I just thought I was being too mean and judgmental, so I kept talking to him every now and then. As time goes on, obviously less and less, because I start to feel like he has feelings for me. But I start to second guess myself and just think I'm crazy. I still only thought of him as just a friend, a fellow coworker friend. So the minute my boss got transferred to manage a different department of the company, I find out that Bob is my new boss. Bob messaged me that same weekend, and I'm shocked and feel compromised because of the new position he just put me in. And of course, he didn't think of what kind of position he put me in, because all he was thinking about was himself and his wants and desires. So this is my horror story of how I got unwanted attention from my boss. P.S. I blocked him, and he has no way of contacting me unless it's face to face. All of my coworkers, which are male, are aware of the situation and have seen the messages. I'm not a vindictive person, and I don't want to ruin his life, but what he did I consider strike 2, and if he does it again, I will go to HR. I'm gonna keep my distance, and if I'm around him, I keep a coworker with me, and he seems to have gotten the message. Update. He wouldn't let it go. He kept messaging me over and over again, and I had no choice but to go to HR. He kept on giving me the hard jobs, as if he was punishing me, and he would still message me and get mad when I didn't message him back. I finally talked to my friends and decided to go to HR. They ended up not doing anything. He still has his job, and I basically had to switch departments to get away from him. I might look for a new job,